It's not often that one gets to interview favorite people, so this is a big day for me. So thank you.
I and my son just last week coined a phrase called personal social responsibility, PSR. So the way companies do CSR, I think every individual should do some PSR.
The way we actually built Edelgive, it was not my project. It was backed by an institution, but built by a whole team. So that is part of the reason why I don't get really impacted when people say, this is CEO's wife's kind of pet project.
Use your wealth effectively for your own sake and society's sake. Have that feeling of gratitude that you have wealth rather than a feeling of entitlement.
I like good things. It's not that I don't like a nice piece of jewelry or a nice watch once in a while. But it's not something that gives me joy.
Hello, I am Naghma Mulla and welcome to a new episode of Give It a Go. Today I'm joined by Vidya and Rashesh Shah, a couple who've built an empire in finance but never lost sight of purpose. Vidya founded Edelgive Foundation, helping drive grassroots change with clarity and heart. Rashesh is the chairman and co-founder of Edelweiss Group and has been at the forefront of India's financial services sector for decades. This conversation is about vision and values, how to grow with intention, give with thought, and back ideas that move the needle. Vidya and Rashesh, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for being us. Very happy to be
It's not often that one gets to interview favorite people, so this is a big day for me. So thank you. I've been watching both of you engage in business and philanthropy with some incredible grit and continuous resilience. So it's amazing for me to get the opportunity to ask you some questions, and thank you. I want to start really from the start. And Rashesh, I will begin with you because I do remember hearing from many, many places that you actually were a nice Guju boy with a secure family background. And Ahmedabad was a radical choice. Is that true? And why did you want to make that choice?
Yeah, I think all my life it was assumed that I'll join the family business.
Yes.
But then, in the holidays, I used to go there and I found that because there were my father and three brothers, so four uncles and their kids and all that. So there was what I would euphemistically call fair amount of underemployment that was there because the business was not growing as much to absorb so many people. So I got bored. I realized there was not enough work. And then I thought it'll be good to, try and go out in the world and see what is there. And I had a friend who said MBA is a good thing to do. So I was also thinking of doing operation research in the US or MBA in India. Got into Ahmedabad. And a lot of stuff that has happened has been through what I call serendipity for me, which is very unlike for Vidya, who always been very,
Structured.
clear and structured. For me, it is like a river, a slightly wild river that is flown opportunistically, but all has actually ended up well. So I'm very happy with this outcome.
Oh, thank you. And Vidya, I've always heard that your father had a huge role in embedding in your mind that financial independence was very important. Independence is very important. Is that how you landed in Ahmedabad with IM?
Yeah, I think it's a combination. One is what you said. My dad always felt that women in particular are vulnerable if, economically, if they are dependent. And perhaps that came out of his own upbringing, his own experiences, and the difficult financial times that his grandfather put him through. And he had to look after, his sisters and his brother and his parents until they passed away, his parents passed away. So I think a lot of the emphasis on financial independence for me and my sister came from there. I think in my case, my inspiration to go to IIM Ahmedabad actually was a little bit of a funny thing in the sense that my neighbor He was the head of marketing for Godrej, which is where my father worked. And he was from Ahmedabad. And I thought he was very cool. And without really knowing what Ahmedabad was, I said, I want to be like him. And then I, spoke to him. I spoke to my dad's other colleagues who were all CAs or MBAs. And that's how I said, I'm going to Ahmedabad. And everything then was planned to get there.
Wow. And when both of you met in IM, right, the value alignment that we see now, like it's been many, many decades now that you've been together, was that something that was naturally there, or is it a lot of, conscious building of this sync that we get to see between the two of you?
So I think,
because you two both are different personality types. Therefore, this question also.
So I was always the more pushy, ambitious one. But obviously, I think when you come out of campus, you want to get a good job. You want to get your career started. And India was a fairly exciting place at that time, but there was not as much clarity on how India is going to grow.
Correct.
So I think the first few years with that, but our desire was always that we were very grateful for the education we got overall. And I think we were more fortunate in the things that we got. And as we used to chat even at that time, that we are eating fruits from trees which are planted by other people.
How beautiful.
So as and when we had a little bit more, resources and money and all, there was always a desire, can we also invest back a little bit? Can we do a little bit? So that was always there, but it was not a very structured that this is how we'll do it. The idea was, let's have a good career, let's start a family.
Yeah.
And then when things started getting slightly better financially and all, is where we felt we can slowly and steadily start focusing on this.
But I think a lot also is communication between partners, and I think our value systems, perhaps because of the fact that we got such an amazing education at what today can be called a throwaway price, and that which most middle class families could actually afford.
Correct.
Without having to resort to loans or scholarships. I think there was gratitude. And I think that gratitude has played a big role in our lives. But there's a lot of, I feel those value systems don't get defined unless there is communication and conversation and constant revisiting.
Yeah.
Not only, in your giving or in your business, but also in how your family sort of builds around those same values.
Yes. While your careers kind of took off after your education, there was also that moment when you realized salary is too boring and you want to get into this world of business and entrepreneurship. And that again is like rocking a steady boat, because at that time, IM grads were getting good. And you were in ICICI, that it was a growing organization. Tell me a little bit about why that step? Why was that need to move out of a stable, income kind of bracket and say, let's start business?
So I think if you go back, about 30 years ago, there was a time, after the balance of payment crisis of India, I think economically India reinvented itself. The economic liberalization, all of that was happening. As a result of the balance of payment crisis, I think India's economic structure got completely rejigged. There, because obviously you realize that you had political independence, but economic independence in India really started after that crisis, after 1991. So one was, it was almost like new independence economically was getting created in India, economic liberalization was happening. But along with that, I think the financial services industry was also going through a rapid, I wouldn't say change, it was a birth. And if you look at NSE, SEBI, automation in the stock exchanges, FII investors coming into India, private sector mutual funds, and you realize that you had private sector banks, HDFC Bank, ICICI Bank, all got started then, because there was a very heavy PSU banking oriented financial system we had.
True.
And after the balance of payment crisis, you realize this was not creating enough savings and capital formation and all. And part of that is India, as we economically liberalized, we also changed the architecture of our financial system from very banking and PSU oriented to a private sector and a non-banking with capital markets oriented. Now, all this is very good to say in hindsight.
Exactly.
With a lot of clarity, describe what happened then. It was not as clear at that time, but you could feel the enthusiasm. You could feel, and you had friends in the US on Wall Street and all. So there was a belief that India capital market seems very exciting. So
Yes.
कुछ तो करना है.
Yeah.
And it also works the other way because you are I am Ahmedabad graduate. You can always go back to a job.
Yeah.
And we also didn't do it completely thoughtlessly. We had a kid. Our son was just born at that time. So I plunged into Edelweiss, but we made sure Vidya kept on earning a good salary for a few more years.
Yeah. When this is happening, and you're so right, actually, you stole my line that in hindsight, all of this is very adventurous and romantic and everything settles in. But when it's happening, it's deeply uncomfortable because you don't know if you're going to be the one who makes it or breaks it. And at that time, Vidya, you were holding the home together. What was going on in your mind? Because it is quite scary.
No, I think one thing about Rashesh is he can really excite you with what the future
That is true.
can hold. There was a headiness at that time. If you see the mid-90s, which is when Edelweiss was really born, there was this excitement about entrepreneurship. And there were lots of people who were either now becoming, young technology entrepreneurs. There were lots of people who were in the non-financial services side who were finding ways to come into financial services because it looked
very exciting.
It looked very exciting. So I think I was not, and the belief, in him has always been incredibly strong. So I was not worried about failure, if one can call it that. I would say, okay, maybe there would be, things will not go as planned. But the fact that because I, never really left the workforce despite, even during my two children, that assurance was there that, the home is taken care of so that there is a lot more room and flexibility and risk-taking ability that, we can then.
And the idea was not that you were bored of salary or you wanted to make, make money. I think wherever we are, all this is, really a lot more than we ever thought it could be possible. But the idea was to build something that is fun, that is exciting, that plays this new capital market opportunity, build an institution. And when I was in ICICI, I had a client, Infosys was my client, I was account officer. And you could see Infosys as a unique organization, institution getting built with employee stock option plans and all of that. So the idea was actually to do the exciting stuff. I think financial insecurity was a very small part because one of the good things is that कहीं ना कहीं से खर्चा निकल जाता है. But the idea was to build a differentiated, unique organization. That's why we called it Edelweiss and all of that. And our guiding principles and our approach and even the ideas create, values protect, all of that was where the real excitement was. कि कुछ अलग से करना है, कुछ हटके करना है.
But then you get in with all that intention. But then what was that first moment when you realize, okay, it's definitely happening? Like the first deal or the first check, that first time when you realize that this is happened.
So the first 3 years were fairly hard because we could cover cost, we could survive. So there was never an insecurity whether you will survive, but whether we'll thrive or not was always a question mark. So I think it was somewhere in 1998, 99. When things started falling in place, and it took 3 years, and it was because initially we all said, okay, 6 महीने में हो जाएगा, and you always prepare for that, saying, okay, 6 months, 1 year, I'm going to be patient. But that 1 year became 2 years, 2 years became 3 years, and again we were able to break even, but you were able to survive, but you felt very empty because you were not thriving. And I think the thriving phase started after 1998.
Yeah. Is there a moment that stands out, or it was a phase that, in this phase you transformed, or is that there was a day or a transaction or a deal that happened?
I think it was some 3 or 4 deals closed. So first, I think about 18, 20 deals in the first 3 years didn't close at all. So we would work on a deal and last minute something will happen. Then we had the Asian financial crisis happen.
Yes.
That. So there was a fair amount of saying almost there but not there. And then suddenly, I think in 4 months, four of the deals got closed, Rediff and Penpal and all. When those deals get closed and when you got the fees and the check coming in and all that, and at the same time the stock market took off, so I think a lot of our investments also started paying off. So somewhere around 1998, it was like you will do well. But there's always this thing, it's not enough. I want to do very well. I want to do very, very well. So the aspiration, the goalpost kept on changing.
Yeah.
And we kept on desiring more. But and we took risk, but we always took very calculated risk. Our idea was to be aggressive with a lot of conservatism inbuilt in that. So in Edelweiss, we say you plan very aggressively and you execute very conservatively.
And is there, through that journey, and now that you see it looking back, is there something that you thought, or your belief about money or wealth, that today you feel that you were very naive about it, or some thoughts about being affluent that after realization you think that it's different, not necessarily good or bad?
Yeah, so I think at least I think Vidya has always been a lot more balanced and all, but I always had this a lot of FOMO about opportunities that, itna sab hoega, we have to capitalize every opportunity. So I think until about 8-10 years ago, I had this feeling that we don't have enough opportunities, we don't have enough capital, we are not maximizing, you have to leave no stone unturned. There was a belief. There was a lot of pushiness and all of that. In hindsight, you realize that you would have achieved what you would have achieved, but having that balance of saying, जो है वो भी अच्छा है, थोड़ा है, थोड़े की जरूरत है.
Oh, sweet.
Of approach, if you had taken, you would have done the same thing, but maybe with a lower amount of anxiety and anger that sometimes got associated. That time there was maybe a little bit of anger at things not working out or anxiety about. So I think you could have done the same ambition, the same aspiration, the same desire to grow and build value for all stakeholders could have been there, but it could have been from a feeling of satisfaction and gratitude rather than a feeling of not enough. And that was, I think, at least the first 20 years of Edelweiss for me. And the last 10 years of Edelweiss have been very different, because now there's a feeling that जो भी अच्छे के लिए है, and अगर मन का हो तो अच्छा, मन का ना हो तो और भी अच्छा type. And it has worked very well, and it has been the best years of at least my life in Edelweiss. Has been the last 8-10 years, where there is a feeling of satisfaction and there is a desire for more.
Fantastic. And you feel the same way, Vidya? I think, like he said, I think I've, always been very conservative about money. But I think looking back, what I did not know, rather than, sort of changing a belief system, and we always spoke about it, is actually the power of compounding. And perhaps and because my father was incredibly conservative when it came, he stayed away from anything, to do with mutual funds or the stock market. No loans, nothing, pay off. If you have a housing loan, just pay it off the day you can. Fixed deposits, So that, like, small incremental growth versus if you believe in the power of compounding, a lot of the anxiety around where it could be 10, 20, 30 years from now, especially for young families. If you save enough, and the power of compounding actually takes you quite far. And for me, that was very revelatory, because suddenly I felt, oh my God, I had never dreamt that, we would actually end up being wealthy. So,
and this entire power of compounding, in my case, I understood it from an investing point of view. But I think the power of compounding from an organization building point of view, I've learned in the last 10 years. And I mean, you will also see it in Edelgive and all. There is a compounding of organizations also that happens.
That is so true.
I mean, there's a compounding on health, there's a compounding of relationships. So this compounding is not just for investing. It's in health, it's in relationship, it's in organization building, all of that. Brick by brick, you build it, client by client, stakeholder by stakeholder.
Yeah.
So this understanding, this compounding in life, which is stay for the long term, play the long game, lage raho one step in front of the other, is in the last 8-10 years, I've realized that you don't need to constantly try to run the fastest. You have to make sure you are just running for the long term.
Yeah. What you keep saying is the sprint or marathon, and what is the decision you want to take, and then stick to it. That's yeah. When again we are there because we will flow into philanthropy, but when affluence started happening, when you realized that okay, what was the first indulgence? Like, was there always this feeling that okay, this car or this kind of house or this kind? What was the first indulgence, but the first thing that you bought and thought, okay, this is good?
So I think the only two indulgences that we have enjoyed is one is house. So I think we bought a house and all when we could, and it was always slightly more than what we could afford at that point of time. So you can call that an indulgence or a stretching. And the other was holidays with kids and all that. So we, instead of having, you know, short weekend holidays with kids, we started having slightly longer holidays internationally and all of that. So those two were the indulgences that once we had a little bit of money, we could spend. Otherwise, cars and clothes and all have never been really something that at least we've been very passionate about.
Yeah. I'm going to dwell on this a little bit because we have a large young population that is inheriting wealth and making more wealth than they had imagined. There is a bit of a FOMO that comes with acquisition or possession, the better car, the bigger ring, the bigger house. There is never big enough. How do you anchor yourself and saying this is okay?
I actually never thought about it till my children said that, Mom, you don't seem to be having a lot of things that my friends' moms have. They would go to their friends' home to just hang out and play, and come back and say, that auntie has so many bags in her wardrobe or so many shoes. And I think somewhere I probably read and felt very deeply that ultimately it's the experiences, the experiences with your people that you love, the time that you spend with people that you love. And given that we were really very busy, we were both very busy parents. We made every commitment that our children, made of us, whether it's parent-teacher meetings or all of that. But we felt ultimately spending that time either at the dinner table or on holidays, like he said, and really thinking about what they would enjoy on holiday, not just where we wanted to go and see. So I always felt that is more important than, and thankfully, I think I'm not very acquisitive. So I like good things. It's not that I don't like a nice piece of jewelry or a nice watch once in a while. But it's not something that gives me joy. I feel whenever I bought something, I said, it's actually just for those 10, 15 minutes that you really enjoy something. And then you almost more or less forget about it. Yes. And then once in a while, I also realize that actually I have too many of those. And it's that incremental, it's not giving you any joy. So for us, I think it's just been about the time, because for us, the time is very valuable and genuinely valuable. And be just there unconditionally and spend that time. So I think perhaps that is just...
Yeah, that is anchored.
And for us and our kids and all that, I think achievement is not what you can buy with money. So when you want a sense of achievement, either running a marathon or doing a half Ironman or doing well in school or in your education or even helping out somebody, all those are achievements which you can't buy with. And again, I think at least we have always felt that if you spend the money, you spend it because it gives you joy rather than you want to make a point to somebody, because that I think making a point with a bigger car or a bigger house and all that is an endless game.
Yes.
And this concept of enough is also a good concept to understand. And then work for the inner joy, for the inner achievement, all of that. And that is what I think So I think running a half marathon gives a lot of joy than having a big car.
I'm sure. A lot of this also goes back to right since the early years of running a business. You had been keeping aside cutting some checks to smaller causes. At that time, philanthropy was not a word often used. It was what you said in the beginning, a sense of obligation to the ecosystem that brought you this far. Again, while cutting those checks, there were some observations you had, and I think that became the genesis of even Edelgive. Why? I always wonder why thoughtfulness of this kind is limited to only a certain few, and how we can make a pandemic of this. But how was your experience of very early giving, when maybe the world and the amount of distress that's out there was not apparent to you?
Yeah. No, I was actually reflecting on this recently, and I was just thinking that one of the strengths I have, and I think it's sometimes also a weakness, is I can almost viscerally sometimes feel somebody's emotion, especially if it's that of pain or sadness. And I think part of that, when I first met Ramesh Uncle, who actually got us on this journey in philanthropy, the way he told the stories was just so evocative. And then when I started traveling and seeing some of the work, it made so much more sense to focus on doing something like that. And I think, in response even to your earlier question, it just seemed as if spending time and money in that space was giving me so much more joy than doing something else. So I think a lot of those experiences, because they were very immersive, they were very experiential. I could go into somebody's house and I would be welcomed, and I could sit with that person and have a conversation and actually feel, not only the difficult circumstances that community or that person was in, but sometimes even the strength, and actually most times the strength, the desire to provide opportunities for a child, or to ensure that the health system doesn't just give up on them. That jid, that passion that I saw also was, for me, just very revelatory. So it just happened. It just felt like this is the right way to actually build what we want to do, not only with our own money, but with how Edelweiss can also morph or evolve its own guiding principles around this aspect of a business as well.
Absolutely.
While, Vidya saw this, the emotional side, and I saw the rational business side of this also, and through this experience. And, in business, we all like to make investments with what we call give you asymmetrical payoff.
Correct.
That if we invest 100 rupees in a business, and if that business blooms and grows, it is worth 1,000 rupees. While if it does not work out, you lose only 100 rupees. Those are the kind of business investment opportunities we look at. I think this entire philanthropy or giving back to society is also an asymmetric payoff. Because if you, I remember really early on, we gave some money for an orphanage, 50,000 rupees, and we saw the payoff is so much higher. So the asymmetric payoff that happens out of philanthropy, because what I'm giving is a small amount, usually affordable to me. What is the benefit occurring to somebody, buying somebody just a computer? I mean, giving a used computer for some schools has such a huge asymmetric payoff that is there. So I think we do things which it cost me so much and gives me so much payoff. But if you can just say that it costs me so much, but it gives society such a huge payoff, and that asymmetric payoff approach, I think appeals to me.
Yeah.
So though I'm couching it in business jargon, but it is actually, I think philanthropy is actually one of the best asymmetric. And even at a personal level, like when I was talking to my kids and all, we are talking about tipping in restaurants and all that, or tipping, in cabs, and the guy who gets the food at home, this Zomato. I think tipping is also, if you can afford it, if you can afford a 3,000 rupee pizza, you can afford a 300 rupees tip.
That is
on
so
that,
true.
very easily.
Yeah.
So why should tipping be so hard? And at least I and my son just last week coined a phrase called personal social responsibility, PSR. So they completely do CSR. I think every individual should do some PSR. And it can be something, it can be giving 20 rupees to, or not arguing with their porter at the railway station, who wants X amount of money, and we try to cut down the 100 rupees out of that. I think all those are also good personal social responsibility habits to adopt if we can afford it.
Yes. No, that is very incredible. But what also stands out in that time is from individual empathy to institutionalizing it. Like you could have gone on and said every year what we make, we will donate so much. But you at a time when foundation creation was not really the norm, you founded Edelgive. And also, Edelweiss has guiding principles that are very aligned to a certain kind of thought. And it was embedded right out there that employees have to participate. We would encourage participation. The second thing that was very remarkable is that there was no carrot or sticks. While the arena was open for the larger workforce to participate, you were not gratifying them or shaming them. Now these are a couple of things that stand out very sharply. So how does the individual to institutional, but institutional also with an open mind saying, this is it and participate if you can and it will be great. These are very important leadership calls. And what leads or what brings you to that point where you allow your ecosystem to do this?
So actually, I think you have highlighted two, what I think have been very core tenets of Edelweiss as a whole. So I think from the day we started, one is there is this deep desire to institutionalize everything, because I do think that, you can easily invest in the market and do some deals and make money, and after you retire, everything is gone. There is no legacy or there is no continuity. And that is automatically available. So if you only want to make some money or capitalize on the opportunities, as an individual, that can be done. And same thing is true with philanthropy. You can cut checks, you can do some good stuff. And the day you are not there, it gets over. But if you look at the foundations in the world or even in India that have got built, that there has been, the legacy has got created. And we have always felt that I think individual effort and individual payoff along with an institutionalization is actually a double whammy. It's not at the cost of, one is not that if I institutionalize, my individual payoff comes down. You can still get the individual payoff, but you can also institutionalize. And that is how in Edelweiss we started by having ESOPs and all that, let's build a company that has value and share the value with everybody, rather than just every year you earn money and cut out, which is a very typical partnership approach where you make money and spread out everything, distribute it. End of the year, you start all over again. We said we'll always use some of that to build an institution, and we all get payoff out of that.
Correct.
So institutionalization across all of our businesses has been a deep desire, because whether for good or for bad, it feels incomplete if you only put individual effort and not make an attempt to institutionalize it, because it should carry beyond you. So Edelgive started by Vidya, now you running it. If we can think of Edelgive as there for the next 40, 50, 100 years, it's a more satisfying thought while doing the same thing we were anyway doing. And the other, as you said, not forcing people to do things, just offering a platform. And that is another thing that in Edelweiss is we call it empowerment, or because people, no matter at what stage you are, you can be a high-level employee, low-level employee in the hierarchy. Everybody likes agency. Everybody likes to decide. I mean, that's a core tenet of human being. That's why people like to vote and all, because you need to matter. And so the other thing in Edelweiss, we have seen to bring out the best in people, give them agency. Give them an offering, tell them how to prefer. But we have never been very paternalistic and said that you have to do this. We have said, this is good to do. If you do it, there's a payoff. If you volunteer, you do other, there's payoff. But if you don't want to do it, it's also your choice. And I think giving agency to people has brought out some of the best leaders in the company also.
That is so true. But while you institutionalize, and particularly with that, this is my question to you, when you started with saying that you felt that empathy, you felt coming home of sorts when you saw, and then moving into this institute. But very soon you also may have realized that there is no end to it and we cannot solve for this. We can probably release somebody's pain a little bit, ease out some systems, but the problems are huge. And through that journey to institutionalize it, is a big thing. But was there a moment when you realized that, and how did you deal with that realization that it's not going to end with just you participating?
No, I think honestly, I just feel that if one person, it's a little bit arrogant to think that one organization, one person, or even a group of organizations, group of individuals uh, can solve some of the issues that we have in our country and even globally. You're seeing a lot of it. There are times when you're disheartened because you do feel that there are so many more people than you ever thought who are not leading the lives, that they should genuinely be leading. Like, I think we were chatting recently, and Rashesh was saying that at least people should have the same starting line. When you start a race, everybody starts at the same starting line, right? That starting line, the absence of that starting line for so many more people than you would imagine is something that, is disheartening. But, then I always remind myself that, rather than worrying about, am I here? I think I've said this even to our team, that I think it's a little bit arrogant to say that I'm going to change 1 billion lives or that. I think you should just do what you can. It doesn't matter how large or small your resources are. Focus on what you think is going to move the needle if it does. Go enjoy the communities that, somehow perhaps your donation, your grant has made a difference. And just enjoy that feeling rather than worrying about the whole world. I think, sadly, I don't think any of us has that capacity.
I think the idea is not to overthink this and do what you can, because I think ultimately, if you look at every religion, the aspiration is how to lead a good life. So I think if a little bit of giving back, investing back, philanthropy is part of your living a good life, whether it makes a huge difference to the world or not, it does make a difference on the margin. And do that, don't overthink it.
How do you involve the kids in this from an early life? Again, I've met both Neil and Avanti. They are very grounded, very in touch with what is happening. How have you engaged with them right from the beginning? What have been the questions that startled you?
No, I think it's very hard to curate this. The children are very smart. They just observe what their parents do. And if I were to tell them to do a certain thing, but I didn't live it the same way, or I didn't behave, basically, if I didn't walk the talk, they very quickly catch you, in your own, and they're very good at they're very happy when they can find fault. And I think that they're also great teachers in that sense. So as much as we have tried through the way we are, and through our giving and our worldview, just to to engage them in, or to even discuss this at the dinner table and engage them in a conversation, I think they've been great teachers. And I think once or twice I remember conversations with my daughter, especially when we began doing a lot of work in women empowerment, and planetary, sort of statements sort of revealed some deep-seated prejudices that we sometimes just come out without even us realizing. She caught me at that and she said, "Mom, I don't think, that's your patriarchy speaking." So I think it's very interesting. I really feel that being a certain, matching what you are to what you say is incredibly important. And you don't really need to do much more than that.
Yeah, but that itself is, again, there's so many things. It's very easy to slip up on that. Because life happens, the things happen around us, and we have to show up in different avatars. And the kids are always watching. Have you had any conversation with the kids, or has there been a moment that has defined how they think about wealth, income, parting? Like you shared a very important anecdote about tipping. I think personal social responsibility is a great idea. But is there something that happened in the earlier days while engaging with the kids?
So I think for I think kids who come from, affluent families, well-to-do families, it's always a very balancing act. And we also, struggled with it in the early days. On one hand, you don't want the kids to feel too entitled. And the other side, you don't want them to feel too guilty. And in the early days, there's always a swing that happens because you have resources, or you feel guilty or you feel entitled. And how to find that balance, which is you are born in a affluent family, well-to-do family. Uh, Enjoy the wealth without being entitled. If you can enjoy it and be grateful at the same time, that's a good outcome. So I think that balancing act, and a lot of that is actually, and it's true with even in the company, I've seen that. Like a lot of people ask, how do you build culture? And I see a lot of similarity between building businesses and bringing up kids. Ultimately, the guiding principles are the same. So it's always walk and talk in sync. What you walk is what you talk, and what you talk is what you walk. If you say something and you're walking differently, you will get caught out, as Vidya said. If you are doing, different things from time to time. So I think it also starts with a lot of inner clarity. And at least on this account, we have always had a fair amount of clarity that we want to lead a good life. We want to have a comfortable, financially secure existence. But at the same time, we want to be grateful for what we have and be grateful for the opportunity if we can contribute to, improving things a little bit on the margin. So that consistency and clarity helps. Then it always becomes, about, tipping or this and that. Those are all actual instances of expressing this. But usually kids will make out very rarely stand. So if we ourselves become very entitled and very that, I to deserve it because I'm like, I say a lot of us, I mean, we have worked hard, we are well educated, all of that. But we also have got a lot more than what we deserve. Because I think the good fortune in India grew, we were in the right place at the right time. So having a little bit of understanding of there is an element of luck, there is an element of good fortune in all this, I think balances out that arrogance or that, overconfidence that you feel from time to time. And then what you are is what your kids will see you. They see you very closely. So at least consistency and clarity is important.
Yes. Vidya, you've been part of the corporate life and you willingly stepped out and became a philanthropist. You started an institution. It's been a journey, and only people who are immersed in philanthropy know how hard it is. But usually it's brushed aside as, this nice thing women do that when they're burnt out. Connecting this to your experience in corporate office, what is the one thing you think, if this was taken away, working for women in corporate India or any structure would become much simpler and much easier? Because you've heard it all in many rooms. What would you take away?
I know sometimes there's this comment that one usually gets about, this is a CEO's wife's kind of pet project. And sadly, it's not entirely untrue. So that is part of the reason why I've just decided it's not going to impact me, because I think the way we actually built Edelgive and the way we thought about it, and it was not my project. It was a project of backed by an institution, but built by a whole team. And we now have 40 people. You lead the team. I think that process of creation was not an individual. It was something that we did by talking to a lot of people. So that is part of the reason why I feel, that I don't get really impacted when people say, oh, okay, oh, are you married to Rashesh? Or they figure out at some point in the conversation. I, however, feel that based on a lot of women that I've met who now have taken charge of their family's philanthropy or their business's philanthropy, I feel they have just done an incredible job. I find that men and women sort of look at philanthropy differently. Men do tend to look at measurement a little more, evaluation a little more. Is the investment in philanthropy actually yielding? The need to see it in data and numbers mainly in data and numbers. The stories and the anecdotes are nice, but they don't really, sort of change how they look at things. I find a lot of women, perhaps because of their lived experiences, and especially when I see it in some of the gender funding that women have done, women philanthropists have done, I think they've put a little bit of themselves and some of the experiences they went through in how they do their philanthropy. So it's not that women don't look at data and don't believe that measurement is important. It's just that they are able to get it a little faster. Would you agree with that, Rashesh?
I would. And actually, I think, as you said, the classic cliche and all that. But again, as I said, only overthink problems that are important. So you don't overthink this too much, whether it's a cliche or whether somebody is, you know, undermining. And yes, I think it is true that Vidya never wanted this to be a hobby horse as a part time, because I don't have anything else to do kind of an activity. From the day one, I think there was a desire to build a platform that can sustain, that can institutionalize, that is teamwork, all of that. And there is also another part of, I think, Edelweiss where we constantly say, can we do it slightly differently? In every business, this is a question we ask all the time. I think in Edelgive, also it has been asked, can we be not just one more foundation? Can we be just not one more affluent family cutting check? Can we be not one company doing corporate social responsibility? Can we build this Edelgive foundation in a way which is, different, differentiated, which brings maybe some of the best practices from all of the world into one organization? So I think that desire and all is where this question gets answered. That how does it matter? Even if you are the CEO's wife, even if you started off that, ultimate the answer is in what have you paid.
Yes.
So I would say overthink what you have built and how you have built and why you have built, and rather than why somebody thinks you are.
And what a glorious thing you built, because when it was not, collaboration was not a word, you factored in what it would take to be collaborative. I mean, we, I think, started using and framing our work around collaborative giving, getting more people to join hands with us, without, talking about costs and profit and all of that, way back when it was not a thing.
Yeah.
And today we are very proudly saying that Edelgive is like a philanthropy asset manager for many folks who would like to give. That whole journey was also actualized with Grow. Many, many things have happened in the way.
Yeah.
It was a very early vision that you've stuck to and consistently given. How does that feel right now? And what were some of the things that maybe you did at that time that you see now bearing fruits?
No, I think there are two or three things. One is what Rashesh was speaking about earlier, asymmetric payoff. I think collaboration really brings that asymmetric payoff, not just because you have a lot more money that you're working with, but also because you have that diversity of thinking in the room. And I've always strongly believed in that, in the possibility of, for example, when we're doing Grow Plus and the curation of Grow Plus has been with so many people that most, it's unthinkable to curate something with recipients of that fund, right? And I think that collaboration is not just about pooling money. It's about bringing that curation element with very diverse elements in the room. And then what actually emerges is just a very delightful, sort of an outcome. The other thing I think was also, I learned a lot, and we all learned a lot from the asset management part of Edelweiss. When you saw that it is possible to build, if you build a good platform, and that robustness of that platform is not only the design curation element, it's the ability to engage with all the actors in that fund, whether it's the people who are going to receive the money, whether it's the people who are going to give the money, whether it's the people in between who are helping you ensure that we stick to what was the vision behind setting something up. I think that is something that I really learned from our funds and our asset management business. And really that was what translated into philanthropy, saying, why can't we do something like this? And it's possibly first of its kind. It's the differentiation that Ashish was talking about, is that they are truly differentiated only because with our ability to think, and to, one of the things you told me is not to design to scale, but design at scale. That is what collaboration enables you to do.
Yes.
And here I would always add a quote which has always been very close to me. And the quote goes as follows: if you want to win wars, build armies. If you want to build an empire, create alliances.
Fantastic.
I think that actually is true in business, that is true in organization, that is also true in what you are doing in Edelgive.
Yeah. Thank you. That is brilliant. But now we come to the part where your wisdom is something that we latch on to and we say, all right, if there's so many young people who are now inheriting wealth, there's so many people who are coming into wealth, earning wealth. If there was something as a philanthropist, you wanted to give a message on how to think about giving in a very important time in the world where it's never been this inequitable, while it's never been this affluent also. What would be some of the things you really would want people to keep in mind?
So I would say, I think as use your wealth effectively for your own sake and society's sake. Do what is affordable. Do what is affordable. Have that feeling of gratitude that you have wealth rather than a feeling of entitlement. But along with that, I would also say think deeply about it. Think on the long-term basis. Build something in a very structured manner rather than very episodic manner.
Yeah.
And so I think all these are the things I wish we knew when we started off. And like everything else in compounding, even giving back has compounding.
Yeah.
So play that compounding game also. I mean, do it consistently. Do it amount that is affordable to you, that doesn't really take away anything meaningful away from you, but can add something significantly meaningful to somebody else. Kind of an approach if you can take. I think it's a good thing. And I think wealth, as I said, the idea is not to feel guilty or not to feel apologetic about it. The idea is to use that also as an instrument for a better world. And I, to a lot of young people that I meet, I always say that wealth is important, but other things are also important, like health and relationships. So invest in all three. Do compounding of those also.
Yeah.
I think through giving back also you build some great relationship with the ecosystem around you, with the society around you. So all these are important things. And as I said, unfortunately, for a lot of us, wisdom comes very late.
Yeah, this is, I always think that there's a counterintuitive thought in giving, which is, we're very conscious that, are we giving, is my giving too small? And a lot of us get caught, especially at an early stage when we're still, we have family obligations, we're still worrying about financial security and things like that. But the counterintuitive is actually give for yourself. So don't think about what, that this person has only given 100 or 500 or 5,000 or 10,000. Just give it because that act of giving should be a selfish one in the sense that it's going to give you that joy. And I think there are also amazing studies around, the value and the joy that volunteering gives you. There was an amazing study somewhere about just the value of a smile. You're in a train and you're seeing somebody who's looking anxious, and you actually just smile at a stranger. There are actually people who've measured the impact of that smile of a stranger on somebody else who's having a bad day. And the rest of their day actually goes well because they're saying, okay, somebody just looked and acknowledged that I exist and smiled at me. So there are it's amazing if that giving 100 rupees makes you smile during the day. I don't know how many exponential smiles you actually created in people around you. So I think, again, like he says, don't overthink it. Just do what you can. Let it be affordable so that you're not, I remember one of our early organizations that we funded. There was this family of a jeweler who had set up an organization in Sholapur. And his family was very upset with him because they felt he was giving an inordinate percentage of his wealth away. And while it was giving, he was feeling good about it. So many people in his own immediate vicinity were unhappy. Don't get to that level. Do what is affordable. Do what gives joy to you and people around you. But just start in whatever way you can. That overthinking is not good at that point.
And the other analogy I would add to this is the example that you gave is when you smile at somebody, you could change their day there.
Yeah.
But actually, when you smile at somebody, it also improves your day.
Yes.
And we always remember that.
Yes.
By giving, by contributing, you are changing other people's life, but you also change.
Yes, you actually reminded me of my grandmother, and I will leave you with an anecdote where at the end of every month, she would ask my father to give her crisp notes. She would not take old notes, soiled notes. She would take crisp notes, so they would have to go to the bank, change, and using those crisp notes, she would pay and donate. And one day I was very curious and I asked her, why do you take these crisp notes just to give it away? She said, I would never have it before, but right now the joy of, parting with that, the look on the face of the person who's taking that money. God has given me the capability of handing over this money, and I want to enjoy it she had a blast. She was a lady who had a blast, but you reminded me so much of that, because that the way when we give, what we get back in return in that moment, by simply looking at the faces of people that we give to, is priceless.
Yeah.
So thank you for this beautiful conversation. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
This was as great for us. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Good stuff.
Thank you.
As you said,
We are very excited.
you have an alternative career.
No, we don't want her to have an alternative career. Don't give her ideas.
This is a good this is a good time pass.
You can serve some nachni chips and you can call it nachni with Naghma.
Oh God. Nachos with Naghma.
Nachos with Naghma. Nachos is too international. This is healthy.
Yeah.
Nachni is
We
healthy.
have healthy nachos also.